Who is that lurking in the shadows? Who is that lurking in the shadows of my consciousness, inserting itself into every story that I have? Who is that? Oh, it's me! Sorry, Paul, I didn't mean to scare you. Okay, who am I? I'm the shadow of my previous self. Oh, yeah. I guess you'd only really get that if you were here 6 years ago when I was UPA guy. No? Anybody? Nobody? Nobody? I did, though, you'll be happy to know, I did take my advice last week. Yeah, I did put my words into actions, and I worked out, and I have my 3-pack ab here. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. You can applaud. It's okay, yeah. I worked really hard at that. Well, here we are in our 4th experience of stories. And happy Halloween, by the way. I see there were some tragic accidents that happened on her way to the center. I'm so sorry about that. We'll yank those scissors out of your skull momentarily. It'll be a magic act. Don't worry. She's okay. Anybody have any ghost stories that they love? Raise your hand if you have, ghost stories that you grew up with that you just absolutely love. Anybody have any good? Nobody has any ghost stories that they love? Nobody likes ghost stories? Kent's thinking, so I'm just waiting.
I like them, but I don't have one.
You like them, but you don't have one. That's good, because I didn't want you to tell me any stories, because I don't like ghost stories. I'm the youngest of 4. I was the closest brother's 9 years older than me, and they were very good at telling ghost stories. Did you ever have older siblings that told ghost stories to you? Let me just tell you, it's not fun. It's a little scary. Well, in all honesty, there was only one. It was when we were camping, and everyone started yelling Elmer. Did everybody know the Elmer story? No, nobody here. Oh my gosh, this is like a dead audience. I'm going to start over again. Yeah, it starts getting dark, and people start shouting Elmer, and the stories creep in about the kid who was lost and being snatched, and I got freaked out as a young kid, and my mom put a stop to that. So they didn't tell me any other ghost stories, but I really just don't like ghost stories or horror movies. There's only one movie that I really like on Halloween, and that's Nightmare Before Christmas. Anybody know of Nightmare Before Christmas? One person, or 2 people. All right, I have my Nightmare Before Christmas socks on, yes. Yeah, this is how we roll here at Unity Palo Alto. And so the wonderful thing I love about that story is that, Jack Skellington, the hero, he was the Pumpkin King. He was the king of Halloween. And after Halloween was over, there was something inside of him that just wasn't fulfilled. There was something that was missing in his life. And he didn't know. He was very scientific, so he started to research and figure out what is missing in my life. And how is it that I can get it? He started searching out the world, and then he finally found it, Christmas Town. And he realized that's what's missing in me. Look, everyone's happy here, like Halloween Town. They were happy just in their own way. And so he took over. Am I spoiling the movie for anybody? This is right up front. So he took over Christmas, and he decided to be Santa Claus. And as you can imagine, Jack Skellington being Santa Claus, Christmas was in a bit of a funk. Let's just say. But at the end of it, the moral of the story was he realized, it wasn't something that I had to be out there, right? Something that was missing out there. What was missing for me was right in front of me. And that's really the story of who we are. Because we're always looking for something outside of there. We've been talking about our stories in life, stories from our past, our present, our future, how the stories from the past, the myths, the legends, the cultural stories that shape who we are, they create this illusion about who we are based on who we grew up with. The stories from our past, which we'll talk about today, that shaped us, they're like the fingerprints on your glasses, the fingerprints on your camera lens. Right? They just keep building up, and you can't really see through them effectively until you clean them off. And that's what this idea of the shadow of my former past, the shadow that's covering up or crowding out my inner superhero. Now, stories are very important for us. They're how we live life. They're how we experience life. And we tell stories all the time, all of the time. They're the creative juices that flow through us. We talked last week about our future stories and how when we focus on what we want to accomplish and have faith in that and do the work step by step, small step by small step, a little bit every day, we move forward in the direction of healing and wholeness and health. And when we don't, we get stuck. There's a great, I think it's great, a great Greek mythology, a great Greek myth of Narcissus. Anybody know Narcissus? Yeah, well, we know the idea of being narcissism, right? It's all about me. It's all focused on me and what's going on in my life. Well, Narcissus was a god that was a beautiful individual, but had disdain and contempt for anybody who tried to show him love. And a lot of people did. They tried to come up to him and show him love, and he just didn't want anything to do with them. Because it wasn't quite what the story that he had created. And he was hunting at one point and came across a nymph named Echo. And Echo immediately fell in love with Narcissus. And Echo followed Narcissus and eventually came up to Narcissus. And Narcissus rebuked her and said, "No, go away." Rebuffed her and said, "I don't want anything to do with you. I'm busy." And that broke Echo's heart. And so Echo went to wander in the forest. Has anybody ever wandered in the forest after being rebuked, rebuffed? Echo wandered in the forest in misery until she basically withered and became simply an echo in the forest. And then the god Nemesis, the god of retribution. Anybody have a god of retribution in them? You don't have to raise your hands, it's okay. The god of retribution then led Narcissus to a pond because he was angry at what he had done to Echo. And in the pond, Narcissus saw his reflection and immediately fell in love with his reflection and started talking to his reflection in the pond. And Echo was simply echoing back what he was saying. And so we had this idea of love, of falling in love. And then he realized, wait a minute, this love can never be actualized. This love can never come true because it's not real. It's a facade. You see, the real tragedy here is not that Narcissus then killed himself, but the real tragedy is that Narcissus was in love with his facade, with his persona, with that which he projected out into the world. But he wasn't in love with what was deep inside of him, his true self, his superhero self. He wasn't in love with his shadow, right? The things that were in his past that flowed over him. He pushed those away, and all he saw was his persona. And so he was expecting that same persona to come back to him and give him love. And when he didn't find it, that's when his heart broke, because he never truly loved himself. Now, stories are wonderful things, and the real lesson here is that we can love more of ourselves than this persona, than the story that we've created about ourselves. The story of, I'm John, I'm a minister. I'm John, I'm a father. I've got 3 kids. I'm John, I used to be in high tech till I was paroled. All of those stories that we create about ourselves are that persona that we're trying to fall in love with because we're afraid of the shadowy parts that are within us. The good news is that we can love ourselves fully. And that's really the definition of wholeness, is to love the whole of yourself. Spiritually, we often talk about the idea of spiritually you are whole because God loves you just the way you are. Have we ever said that to our kids? God and I love you just the way you are. Only every Sunday, and now every second Sunday of the month, yes. I know, it's so perfect. God and I love you just the way you are. The whole of you. So spiritually, there's nothing left out in God's love, even those shadowy bits and pieces. And so when we learn to love that shadowy part of us, when we learn to give love to that anger within us, or the loneliness, or the sadness, or the fear in us, we can include more of who we are. And when we do that, we bring that shadow, that shadowy self, out into the light so that we can heal it. And that's really the essence here, is the idea that love is the healing energy that transcends our false beliefs about ourselves. Love is the healing energy that transcends our false beliefs about ourselves. And it's not a love that we get out there. It's not a love that we get in the mirror. It's a higher love. It's that divine love, that essence of God that's within us. Knowing that God loves you completely, wholly, in your entirety. And the good news is that through that love, we can change our stories. We can shift out of that idea that I'm not enough, that I'm not wanted, that I'm not good enough, that I'm not good, to forgive ourselves, to move through ourselves, to give ourselves a little self-compassion so that we can be whole amongst all of our foibles, with all of our shadows, our cracks and crevices, with all of those things that we feel are broken. We can love them back into a sense of wholeness. Now, when we start to become aware of these stories of our past, of our personal past, it usually and often happens when we are young. Right? And we may be pre-verbal, we may not have the cognitive power to separate ourselves from what's being said or what we're experiencing in life. And they create a pattern within us. They create those fingerprints on our glasses. And suddenly we decide that becomes who we are. You know, I'm now that person. And when we start to become aware of the story that we are living, when we start to become aware of those stories from our past, from the mythology, from the culture, when we start to become aware of it, that can be a transformative experience, a transformative catalyst. Those stories, those wounds, are what transform our lives, can give us strength. Now, I've spoken to this with many people, and of course the answer is, it's not the only way to do it, right? We don't need the terrible things in our life or the things that have happened to our lives to transform us. We can do that by doing spiritual practice and being open and willing to do it. But sometimes we need to take a look at the stories that are clouding that path. And so becoming aware of those stories can be a transforming catalyst for us. The stories from our past are created when we have moments of false decisions, moments of false understandings. And we're in a relationship, we're in a situation, and we come away with a false understanding of our family, of our friends, or of our worldview. Or we're coming away with those falsities and without the mental capacity to view our world or to experience life from a reflective context, from the idea that life is reflecting back to me lessons. So when I'm feeling stress and strain, the gift is that, well, where's the stress and strain in me? When I'm seeing the conflict and it's affecting me on the news or whatever, and it's really getting me down, well, where's the conflict in me that I can heal? The world is a reflective mirror for us. And when we look at the world from that perspective, like Narcissus did, but not look at it from the perspective of, oh, there's just me and my persona, but let's look at all of me. Let's see the mirror of all of me, the whole of me, so that I can find the areas that are being triggered. We've talked about triggers, right? Anybody have a trigger? The rest of you have healed. That's good. Good job. But we all have triggers in our lives, and it comes from these moments of faulty decisions. And then we personalize the pain. We make it about us, like Narcissus. You know, what happened out here is all about me. And all about, what I didn't get in life, or what they did to me. It just becomes all about us because we personalize the pain by not when we don't have our needs met or our perceived needs. Our perceived needs of, being loved by all of you, especially you. Get on it, buddy. Our perceived needs of, having our needs met from our society, our friends, our family. Those perceived needs, and when those needs are not met, we internalize them as personalized pain. And that pain then gets turned into a belief. That pain then compounds the belief of I'm not worthy, I'm not lovable, I'm not good enough, I'm not good. And those beliefs then start to look for proof out into the world that I'm true, that it's correct. Here's another way in which I'm not good enough. And all of this is what we call our shadow. Now, the wonderful thing about the shadow is that it can be brought into the light. And we can learn from it. We can learn about our past, and we can learn about what we perceive as missing. The shadow is anything that we've repressed or disowned. Anything about us that we want to push away. Anything about us that, we don't like. My 3-pack abs should really be a 6-pack abs. I need to do a little bit more work. I just don't like it. My wife Tiffany went on a business trip to Healdsburg with her executive team, and at the end of it, they did a bike ride through the wine country. And as she puts it, she was in last place. Up until the very end, and then, she beat her HR guy. I think he was probably just slowing down so she wouldn't feel bad. Don't tell her I said that. We'll cut that out of the script. But she was, oh my gosh, I'm so out of shape. Oh my gosh, I can't do it. Well, just a little bit at a time, right? You don't get 3-pack abs by working out for 1 week. Just a little bit at a time. So what we believe is not acceptable to us are what become our shadow beliefs about us. We take on this unconscious belief and we project it onto others. That's why we're always falling in love with the same people who hurt us. That's why we're always getting into the same type of arguments. That's why we're always moving into a job where we're feeling the same way, because we're always projecting our own shadow on everyone else, and that's how we live life. It becomes our ego's default operating system, that shadow self. It's the fingerprints on your lens. Dr. Gary Simmons, I'm taking a class with him. He's a Unity minister, and he's teaching an integral theory of ministry. And he talks about it this way: I confuse myself with what I am having. I confuse myself, my sense of self, and self with a capital S, my sense of true self, my inner superhero. I'm confusing that with the experience that I'm having. Instead of looking at it as just here's an experience I'm having. It's no, this is who I am now. Because we've confused ourselves with that essence. And Dr. Jane Simmons says the best cure for an unhealthy, dysfunctional story is a new, healthy, inspiring one. So it's letting go of the old story and tuning in to your new story. It's letting go of that idea of your shadow as being yourself, not pushing it away, but including it in your life. Saying, all right, this is part of what I am. This is what I'm here to heal. And it's affirming that truth of who you are, that inner spiritual hero. I love to think about it this way. Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, the co-founders of the Unity movement, one of their biggest practices is the idea of denials and affirmations. Raise your hands if you've heard of denials and affirmations. Yeah, so denial has gotten some bad rep. This was back in the early 1900s when they were talking about it, because denial is now, I'm being in denial about my shadow. But that's not what they were talking about. What they were talking about is taking a moment to let go of the power that we're giving those beliefs. To simply let go of that power. To deny its power over us. Not to push it away Not to say it doesn't exist, but just taking back our power. And the affirmation is affirming self, affirming who we are as children of God, as divine essence. As a master teacher once said, you are the light of the world. It's time for you to shine. It's time for you to be that beautiful expression of your authentic self. And as we begin to honor the whole of ourselves, even the shadowy bits and pieces, then we can move through life more gracefully, more effortlessly, more peacefully. Now, there are 5 steps that can help us move through this transition of acknowledging our shadow self and discovering that self within us. And the first step is become aware. Become aware, appreciate the discovery. Third step is compassion. The fourth step is visualize, and the fifth step is authentic action. So become aware. When we become aware that, hey, my glasses need to be cleaned up. No big whoop. I'm not giving I'm not creating a big stink over it. It's just like, oh, here you are again. Here's my old friend. Become curious. What have you come to teach me today? Now, I've been going through this practice now for 6 years. I teach a course called the Quantum Living Class in the Q Process, and we'll be offering this at the beginning of the year in January. So when you're ready to start off the year, this is a great class to help you become friends with your shadow. Because it's just a former self, right? That former little kid in my life that at some point in time didn't get his needs met. And so I become curious, and that helps me become aware. I wonder why I'm feeling angry. I'm wondering why I'm feeling afraid. I'm wondering what's behind this, because it's not the stimulus that's in front of me. That happens all the time. But what belief do I have that's behind it that's getting me triggered, that's getting me upset? What shadow thought is going on in my head? So become curious. The second step is appreciation. I want to be very clear. This is appreciating the discovery that there's something within me to be healed. It's not appreciating the person, the situation, the thing out there, but it's appreciating, the awareness. Oh my gosh, this is something within me that I can heal. And then when I heal it, it bothers me less. I become happier. I become healthier. My relationships start to bloom. My spiritual life, my career life, my creativity, everything starts to get a little bit better because I'm now have the opportunity to heal. And the third step is self-compassion. And out of these 3 steps, this is probably what I think is one of the most important steps. Self-awareness is obviously, nothing's going to happen unless you don't have self-awareness. But in that, you must have compassion. Compassion for yourself. And compassion for everyone else involved in the shadows experience. Because when we shame ourselves, when we blame ourselves, when we start to guilt ourselves, then we're just heading back down the spiral. We're creating a story that I'm not worthy. We're creating a story that I'm not good enough, and I'm so bad. So we have self-compassion knowing that I did the best that I could in that situation because that's all that happened. I couldn't have done better because I didn't. So I did the best that I could in that situation. And I can have the same compassion for the others. They all did the best they could. They're all working through their own coping mechanism of their own triggers. They all have their own shadow side that they're dealing with, and this is the way they could deal with it. Now, doesn't that lighten the load a little bit? It's not really about me. It's about their own shadow work that they're doing. So I can have compassion for others. Now, compassion is when we are, let me start over. The shadow is when we are not connected with our wholeness. And that is in the way, that is the only way in which we can feel diminished. So the shadow is in the way of our experiencing our wholeness, our oneness, our unique, authentic self. And that is the only way that we can feel diminished, because it's the shadow, it's that trigger within me that's being pressed. And when I'm living in my wholeness and living with self-compassion and living in that state of, knowing my true self, my authentic self, things happen and it just bounces off my 3-pack abs. Boing. It doesn't dent. But only when we are in alignment with that true self. Now, self-compassion has been shown to raise our emotional intelligence, to lower our cortisol level, to increase our heart rate variability. All of those are very good. It reduces anxiety. It reduces depression. It reduces shame simply by applying self-compassion to ourselves. And it enables us to truly let go. You've heard the phrase, let go and let God. Well, you can't let go unless you have self-compassion. You can't let go unless you have compassion for the other person. Otherwise, it's going to be building up in you as resentment. What was the God at the beginning? Nemesis is going to come along and lead you to your pond to reflect back to you, this is who you are being. This is the persona that you're being. So self-compassion enables us to let go of all of that and to step into that light that we're here to be, to step into that being the salt of the earth. And then we can visualize. There's another way of looking at the situation. We've already appreciated it. We appreciate it for being an opportunity to heal. And so I can visualize myself as healing in this moment. I can change because we know that when we see something in the world, well, maybe we don't know this, but science tells us that there are 3 billion pieces of data floating around in this room, and we're aware of only about 1,000 of them, and most of them are to keep us alive. So if you get 10 people in a room who observed something, you're going to get 10 different views about what happened. So most of the time, what we're looking at is not real perception. It's through the lens of our fingerprints. It's through the lens of our story. And so it allows us to visualize a different experience. We can take that little kid, right, that's sitting back there wounded, and we can give them the love. My little mini John, my mini John. Give them the love. Give myself the compassion. Give them the sense of safety. Give them the sense of comfort and security. Give them the wisdom that I may not have gotten from my parents who were just coping with their own shadow, who I may not have received from my friends or my family or the world around me or my culture or those myths. I can give that to myself. And I can draw upon that infinite flow of God's love that is within. That infinite flow of life, love, and wisdom. That infinite flow that it's always there when we have compassion enough to see it for ourselves. And so we begin to visualize that for ourselves and create a new story. Create a story that we can start to live from. And then the next step, take authentic action to demonstrate the new story. Take an action that will give you a felt sense of gratitude, a felt sense of being safe and secure, a sense of being appreciated, of having wisdom. Take a step that will solidify it within your being, to bring forth and demonstrate that idea, and to create that story for yourself. So that the next time you're in the situation, you know how to do it. You can give yourself that authentic action. Give yourself the love for the whole of you, the compassion for yourself and for others, to cement the story that creates new actions, that creates healthier beliefs about yourself. Healing comes about not by trying to destroy the shadow, but by bringing it into the light, to including it, to know that it's just a part of your story, but it doesn't have to define who you are. When I love all of myself, I stop projecting myself on others. We talked about that idea of getting love from other people, which is Narcissa was looking for, but a very specific kind of love. But it was a love that he couldn't give to himself. And so he could never find it out there. So when we can give that love to ourselves, when we can open up to that divine essence of God loves me, if no one else does, God loves me. Can you say that? God loves me? Go ahead, say it. Yeah, let's say it like we mean it. One more time. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Yes, that's the truth. And when you can come from that space, it fills you up. And then you are overflowing with it enough to give it to someone else and have it make a difference. When I love all of myself, I stop projecting myself on to others. Here's a story of how that showed up for somebody just a few days ago. This is from Jo Angelis. Jo is our licensed Unity teacher candidate. She's going through the process of becoming a teacher, licensed Unity teacher. And through that, she's teaching her first spiritual class, the gathering here at the center. And she has to do a lot of through her skills demonstration tests, she has to demonstrate for ministers how she's doing. And then they get critiqued. So she texted me this morning and said, and I do have permission to share this. She said, "Hi, John, thanks for the series on stories. I'm now scripting the story of my days and weeks from my beingness. Not from what I want to have or what I want to do, but from that beingness that God loves me. That beingness of that being her own inner superhero. From my licensed Unity teacher, coming from joy, ease, and love, I am gelling. It was. I was prepared and engaged for each class. All interactions and exercise perfectly orchestrated. Yes, it was fun too. Even my gathering class had insights and laughs. Instead of pre-suffering, thank you, Lisa. Instead of pre-suffering, I scripted the coming week or day from pre-gelling, from pre-being in the flow. She created her story up front. This is how I'm going to show up. I'm going to show up with that love. I'm going to show up with that enthusiasm, and I'm going to be my authentic self. Yes, I have shadows. Yes, I'm here to learn and integrate my shadow into my life. It's just, it comes up every once in a while, my shadow twin Skippy. And every time it does, I have the realization, I'm just feeling less than. There's my old friend. Come on, friend. Come on over here. Let me give you some love. And that allows me to give others love. And that allows me to be in the situation and not feel diminished by it. And stand strong and be the light that I was meant to be.